God's peace to you on this fifth Sunday after Pentecost. Our text this morning is taken from St. Mark, the 5th chapter, verses 21 through 43. When Jesus had crossed again in the boat to the other side, a great crowd gathered around him, and he was by the sea. Then one of the leaders of the synagogue named Jairus came to him, and when he saw him, fell at his feet and begged him repeatedly, "My little daughter is at the point of death. Come and lay hands on her so that she may be well and live." So he went with him, and a large crowd followed him and pressed in on him. Now there was a woman who had been suffering from hemorrhages for 12 years. She had endured much under many physicians. She had spent all that she had, and she was no better, but grew worse. She had heard about Jesus and came up behind him in the crowd and touched his cloak, for she said, "If I but touch his clothes, I will be made well." And immediately her hemorrhage stopped, and she felt in her body that she was healed of her disease. Immediately aware that power had gone forth from him, Jesus turned about in the crowd and said, "Who touched my clothes?" And his disciples said to him, "You see the crowd pressing in on you. How can you say, 'Who touched my clothes?'" And he looked all around to see who had done it. But the woman, knowing what had happened to her, came in fear and trembling and fell down before him and told him the whole truth. He said to her, "Daughter, your faith has made you well. Go in peace and be healed of your disease." While he was speaking, some people came from the leader's house to say, "Your daughter is dead. Why trouble the teacher any further?" But overhearing what they said, Jesus said to the leader of the synagogue, "Do not fear, only believe." And he allowed no one to follow him except Peter, James, and John, the brother of James. And when they came to the house of the leader of the synagogue, he saw a commotion, people weeping and wailing loudly. And when they had entered, he said to them, "Why do you make a commotion and weep? The child is not dead, but sleeping." And they laughed at him. Then he put them all outside, and he took the child's father and mother and those who were with him. And he went in where the child was, and he took her by the hand and said to her, "Talitha cum," which means, "Little girl, get up." And immediately the girl got up and began to walk about. She was 12 years of age. At this, they were overcome with amazement, and he strictly ordered them that no one should know this, and he told them to give her something to eat. Last week, Jesus commanded creation to be silent and still, and a storm and the wind and the waves obeyed him. And today we discover what happened when he crossed back home to the other side after the storm. He was by the sea. It seemed to be his custom to preach on the beach, which is where the mob comes to surround him. One of the crowd includes the leader of the synagogue. It's his job to administrate the synagogue. It's not a position held by a rabbi. Rather, he's more like a church administrator or a council president. It would be his job to assign the rabbis to speak and to teach at the synagogue. In that capacity, he had likely asked Jesus to preach when he was in town. He knew Jesus and what he could do. He may even have witnessed his healing on a Sabbath or the casting out of a demon in his own synagogue. He falls down at Jesus' feet and won't stop begging him to please save his daughter from death. Make her well. And these two things, by the way, are not the same thing. He actually requests Jesus to save her from death, not that he heal her. In fact, both of the women in today's text go looking to Jesus not just for healing, but for salvation. The actual words for cure and healing are only in this text once. But the word you have heard is heal throughout the text is actually sozo, salvation. Jairus asks for salvation for his daughter. And the woman thinks to herself that if she just touches Jesus, she will be saved. The woman who interrupts Jesus' journey to Jairus' house was a woman of faith. We know that she is of faith because she's heard about Jesus. And the word that she has heard about him has brought her to believe that if she can just touch the hem of his cloak, she will be healed of her curse. And her curse is uncleanliness. Her monthly cycle has become her daily routine for 12 years. And the law is clear that when a woman is bleeding, she is unclean and must quarantine herself apart from the public. We have just experienced a year of quarantine, but she has been in this state for 12 years. Unable to see friends and family, unable to interact with anyone except the others quarantined for uncleanliness. During those years, she has suffered under many doctors, who not only drained her of all her money, but who managed to make her situation worse, not better. So this unclean woman is breaking the law in many ways. She is in public. She touches a man, both of which are forbidden. The second offense makes Jesus unclean as well. I suppose you could say she is a thief for stealing Jesus' power. And in delaying him, she causes Jairus to arrive too late to his daughter. In her faith, she comes up to Jesus in secret, but he feels his power go out to her. Jesus feels faith. It is what he has come to earth to do, proclaim salvation and give it to those who have faith in him. He feels power leave and he asks who has touched him, which seems like a silly question to the disciples, given the crowd surrounding him. But Jesus is not talking about any of those who are bumping into him. He knows that one specific touch, that one faithful touch, had been answered with the power of God, and he wants to know who had done that. Trembling, frightened, caught in her own sins, the woman confesses, "I am the one who made you unclean." And Jesus responds to the confession not with condemnation, but with salvation. He declares, "Daughter, your faith has saved you. Now be healed of your affliction." That's one of the two places in this text. That's the one place where the word is heal instead of salvation. Can you imagine being Jairus and hearing Jesus address this unclean woman as daughter and declare to her the salvation that he is seeking for his own daughter? He came to Jesus directly. He was clean in the law. He fell to his knees as a sign of respect for Jesus, and he pleaded with many words for Jesus to save his daughter. And this unclean, sinning sneak thief is declared to be a daughter and is saved and healed. Even as Jesus is explaining to her that her faith in him has been her salvation, the word comes from Jairus' house that his daughter is dead. There's no reason to trouble Jesus any further. What a horror for Jairus. He played by the rules. He observed all the customs with the teacher. He was clean in the law, and he begged for the salvation of his daughter, and this other unclean daughter was the one saved. Jesus hears them speaking of death and says to Jairus, "Do not fear, only have faith in me. He has cast out demons. He has healed the sick. He has shown himself to be salvation from sin and the devil. But death? Jesus takes Peter, James, and John with him, the same three that will later witness his transfiguration and see him speak with Moses and Elijah on a mountaintop. He takes them to see and hear a different divine power. When Jairus and the 4 men arrive at his house, the mourners are all wailing, and death is declared the victor through their tears. Jesus tosses them all out. So certain are they of her death, so little faith they have in Jesus, that when he declares she is not dead but only asleep, they laugh at him. So he throws them all out of the house, taking with him only his disciples and the girl's parents. And then the Lord of creation, the same one who had calmed the storm with a couple of words, now commands the creature lying before him, "Little girl, arise." And as with the wind and the stormy sea, the little girl obeys the command of the Lord of creation. She arose immediately and began to walk around. Jesus asks for food to the test that she is alive and not a spirit. It was truly amazing grace, the resurrection of the dead. In Greek it says they went insane with bewilderment at this resurrection. Just this glimpse into Jesus' divinity causes them to go out of their minds, as will happen later with Peter, James, and John when they witness the transfiguration. The Lord and author of all creation has twice in the span of one day rewritten his creation, stilling the winds and waves and speaking this little girl back into existence. In between those 2 miracles, he had healed a Gerasene demoniac, casting many demons out of legion and into a herd of pigs who promptly drowned themselves rather than be possessed. That too had left all who heard it amazed. It has been an evening and morning of amazing, mind-blowing grace. When he stilled the storm, he said to the disciples, "Why are you afraid? Have you still no faith?" When Jairus heard his daughter was dead, Jesus said, "Do not fear, believe." Faith is what allows us to face our fears. The trembling woman, frightened at her ostracism, listened to the words she believed, that even touching the hem of his cloak would save her. Jairus, fearing that he is too late, fearing that he will never see his daughter again, walks into that fear, clinging to the words of Jesus, that he, not fear, but instead believe, as he walks straight into the death with the laughter of those outside still ringing in his ears. He walks into the room believing the word of Jesus that his daughter was only sleeping. What he sees there is his dead daughter obey the command of her Creator, not only rising immediately, but walking around and eating. We all have things we fear. For some of us, it's loneliness. For others, illness, our own limitations, being too late, being mocked or embarrassed, death. In each one of those fears, we are afraid that God can't and won't choose to bless us. He has promised us daily bread, and we fear he will fail to keep that promise. Have you still no faith? For your loneliness, he has promised to never leave you or forsake you. In your limitations, he has promised that what you can't do, he can. In our failings, he has promised to be our victory. In death, He has promised to be resurrection and life. We can hear his words and believe in our hearts, or we can listen to the fears. Satan stirring up doubt in the goodness of God and unbelief that Christ can save us. Do not listen to those fears. Only believe that the word of Christ is so powerful that even when you lie dead, able to do nothing, able to speak no words on your behalf, able to fear no more, the Creator will give a powerful command. Little child, arise. Amen.